I am Allison Cordy. I am the manager for capacity building with LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, and I am joined by...
This is Emily Bradley, Program Officer at Home for Good at United Way of Greater Los Angeles.
Hi, and this is Amanda Adams, Grants Coordinator on the Home for Good team at United Way.
Good morning, this is Candace Baker, Coordinator for CES Capacity Building with the Los Angeles.
Great, all right. Okay, so our agenda, there are your presenters. So our agenda for today, we'll go through, give an introduction to the capacity building initiative, just to set some context for this work, take you through the eligibility of who's able to apply to receive funding, walk you through the updates that we've made to this application, talk about the submission and review process, give you an introduction to the Core Capacity Assessment Tool, or the CCAT for short, walk you through eligible and available technical assistance providers that are able to assist on the project, and then we'll hold, as I mentioned earlier, and then have an opportunity to answer any questions that you might have. Okay. So for a little table setting, over a year ago, LAHSA, with the passage of Measure H, recognized the need to support agencies in enhancing their operational infrastructure so that we can strengthen our ability to provide services to our homeless neighbors. So the funding through this opportunity is available from two places. On the public side, which is provided by LAHSA, through Measure H funding, is made available by the County of Los Angeles Homeless Initiative Strategy E7, which is regarding strengthening the coordinated entry system. So there's two ways that we do this. One is through technical assistance, which is the purpose of this webinar today, and the other is through training. So today we'll focus primarily, obviously, on the technical assistance side of things. Okay. So as I mentioned, that there's two sources of funding available. So on the public side, I mentioned that there's Measure H funding, and we've partnered with the Home for Good team with United Way so that we can leverage funding on the private side. And I will turn it over to Emily Bradley to talk about the private funding.
Great. Excited to be partnering on this project. I think it's, really in recognition of the incredible work that's going on in the community, the incredible infusion of dollars that were available through Measure H, as Allison mentioned, our need to kind of build up and strengthen and shore up our services to be able to meet the demand on the ground. So we, in partnership with the E7 money, the private philanthropy has put in additional dollars to help support additional technical assistance and infrastructure, one-time infrastructure costs. We'll talk more about the details of that, but it's just important that you know that this is a joint RFP between public and private dollars that you can apply for through one streamlined RFP and be able to access both streams of money.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, so moving on to talk about, so this opportunity is open to all nonprofit homeless service providers and developers participating in the Los Angeles County Coordinated Entry System. So essentially, you just need to be a nonprofit organization that provides services to individuals or families experiencing homelessness and or participating in the Coordinated Entry System. So what does it mean to be participating in the Coordinated Entry System? Okay. So for basic eligibility regarding the CES participation, a CES participating agency shall endorse the guiding principles of the Coordinated Entry System and agree to support the continuum of care systems approach to defining access points, assessment processes, prioritization protocols, and referral strategies. So that sounds very technical, and we have a few attachments that walk you through those specific elements, but basically, in layman's terms, what that means is you just need to be adhering to the CES principles and the approach that the continuum of care has identified as how that coordinated entry system will operate. Okay, so to learn more specifically about those guiding principles, the policies that your organization has to be adhering to. We've provided links, and again, this presentation will be made public so you can follow the links. So don't stress yourself out at this moment of the information. The thing I will note is that LASA is in the process of cleaning up all of our CES information on our website, which I think everyone will jump with joy about. So be sure after this webinar that you bookmark the pages and check back frequently, as we are continuously releasing interim guidance on those CES policies. Okay. So just for further eligibility clarification, you do not need to be administering a CES contract. Agencies just need to demonstrate that they're adhering to the CES policies and guiding principles in their narrative to demonstrate that they are a CES participating agency. You also do not need to be administering a LASA contract to be eligible for this opportunity. So you do not need to receive LASA funds. You can be funded by the city, the county, by independent funders. You just need to be serving individuals who are experiencing homelessness and demonstrate that you are participating in the coordinated entry system. Okay. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda.
Okay, so I'm going to walk through the updated capacity building application and kind of highlight some of the changes. So as some people may already be aware, administration of the capacity building opportunity transitioned from LASA to United Way's Home for Good team in July 2018. So what does that mean exactly? Well, in collaboration with LASA, we worked to incorporate feedback that we received from previous applicants to help streamline the application process and to make it more user-friendly overall. So an example of that is that we ended up splitting the application into two different sections. So now there's a separate application for assessment and a separate application for implementation and infrastructure. So all applications that we receive will be reviewed by the Home for Good Funders Collaborative evaluation panel, and all awarded agencies will be contracting directly with United Way for the entire grant amount. So the new applications can be found at the website that you see on the screen there, the homeforgoodla.org/grantseekers. And so initially with the previous application process, there had been some confusion about the difference between assessment and implementation and how to get started. So we tried to create some new helpful resources, which you can access on the website. So the first place to get started is reviewing the Find Your Fit chart, which you can see a little screenshot of on the presentation. And that highlights the purpose and key differences between assessment and implementation. And there is also an information packet and a frequently asked page on the website for additional reference. And so if you would like to talk with someone about your application or submission, if you want to review any key areas of focus or discuss any questions, you can contact the capacity building team at LASA via email. So you can just shoot an email to capacitybuilding@lasa.org, and they will reach out to you, and they're happy to talk through any questions or concerns about the application process.
So one of the things that we had noticed with the initial release of the application was providers were having a tough time understanding where to get started and put together a thoughtful application. So in that we want to provide meaningful assistance to your organizations, we felt that this split out would be helpful so that now LASA staff are free to engage with your organizations to help have a conversation before you submit. So if you're not sure that you're on the right track, or you're not sure that what you're submitting will make for a competitive application, Candace and I, the capacity building team, are available to assist with helping you scope that application, and United Way will be doing the ultimate evaluation. So we recognize the need to offer assistance and then to separate out the roles of who's providing the assistance and who's reviewing applications.
And I don't think we can underscore enough the value of being able to pre-scope your submission. So we do encourage everyone, if you have questions, concerns, if you want support in ensuring you're on the right track, that everything you're asking for is eligible, and so that it's a more streamlined review. We do encourage you to reach out to LASA and talk it through with their team.
Yeah, this is a big deal. We've never been able to do this before, so it's really exciting. Please, please, please take advantage.
All right, great. So now we're just going to walk through kind of the high-level parts of the two different applications. So the assessment application is for organizations that have not completed a formal capacity needs assessment within the past 3 years. And if approved, your organization will receive a total of $8,000 in public funding from LAHSA, and that money is designated to go to an outside consultant, contractor, or vendor who will conduct a capacity needs assessment. And so awarded agencies would receive the grant award directly, and again, all awarded agencies are contracting through United Way, and then the agency would contract with the outside consultant or vendor. And if approved for assessment, then your agency will also be pre-qualified for technical assistance and implementation support, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And so most agencies apply for a general assessment to help them identify and prioritize areas of focus. However, if your agency has already done some preliminary exploration of its needs and would benefit most from a more targeted assessment, you can explain that in your application. So either way is fine. If your agency isn't really sure where to get started and you would really like that assessment process to help you narrow your, or if your agency has already done some internal exploring and had some conversations and really feels strongly that it has a defined focus area already, you can apply in either situation and you just kind of explain that in your narrative. And some of the most common requests for assessment areas of focus that we have seen are related to IT, HR, finance, strategic planning, and board development. You can see on the screen we have examples of different types of areas of focus. This is not an exhaustive list by any means, so again, we encourage you to reach out to the capacity building team at LAHSA if you want to explore other possible ideas. And again, that would be, so awarded agencies will be getting the $8,000. That would be going to an outside consultant. And the assessment process will look something like a consultant coming in, conducting interviews with staff, reviewing existing systems and procedures, and developing a list of recommendations for ways to strengthen internal capacity in a specific focus area. And we will talk further about infrastructure and what that means, but assessment applications are not eligible for one-time infrastructure costs. The focus of the assessment should be tailored towards strengthening organizational effectiveness. So an example of that would be the development of policies and procedures rather than the purchase of one-time infrastructure upgrades like a computer. And so again, agencies that are awarded are pre-qualified for implementation and technical assistance support. And so it is possible to request infrastructure support at a later time once you've kind of completed that assessment process. Okay, and so the other application that is available is an infrastructure application. And this application is intended for organizations that have already completed a formal capacity needs assessment within the past 3 years and can provide documentation. So at this point, the assessment process is complete and your organization has a defined area of focus, as well as specific findings on how to start putting the assessment recommendations into action. So that might, will look like different things for different agencies, but some examples of what implementation means would be a consultant overseeing the creation of a strategic plan, a consultant developing new or updating existing policies and procedures, or possibly an outside contractor or vendor installing a new database and then conducting staff trainings on how to use the database. So if approved, $40,000 of your request will be supported with public funding from LAHSA that your organization will then provide to an outside consultant or contractor to start implementing the assessment findings. So your request can exceed $40,000. That's just the public funding cap from LAHSA. And as Emily explained, that's part of why we are pairing this opportunity with private funds so we can really make the most of this funding opportunity. So if your request exceeds $40,000, the remaining amount may be supported by private funding through the Funders Collaborative and its aligned funding partners. And so there is no set cap for implementation and infrastructure. We actually encourage organizations to express their full need and full cost, both within their narrative application and on the budget. And requests are, vary greatly, but just to give kind of a we have seen so far is anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000, again, for implementation and infrastructure.
If we could just go back with that, I do want to point out that there are a few ineligible costs on the assessment application. So because this is a one-time grant, we are unable to provide staffing or staff salaries, funding for the purchase of land or office space. We're not able to offer general operating or administrating funds or offer reserve funds as well. Temporary recruiters are also an ineligible cost for this opportunity in that LASA is providing right now assistance from recruitment, from contracted recruitment staff. So if you have a need to hire temporary recruiters and you're interested in doing that and you're seeing, oh no, it's an ineligible cost, please reach out to us at capacitybuilding@lasa.org so we can get you connected with those recruiters as a separate opportunity.
Okay, good clarification. And that is another great opportunity and shows you the extent of the investment that goes beyond just this RFP. So please take advantage of that. Thanks.
Yes, and then so the last piece of the implementation application is infrastructure. So one-time infrastructure support can also be applied for during the implementation phase for consideration by the Funders Collaborative. And infrastructure includes things like the purchase of a software system, databases, any IT or computer equipment. It can also cover additional consulting time that exceeds the $40,000 of public funding. So again, the public funding is restricted in that it does need to go towards a consultant to implement the findings of the assessment. So the public funds cannot go to purchase a new computer or a database. But that's where the Funders Collaborative can kind of step in and help supplement and complement whatever the implementation project is. So an example of this would be if an agency completed a formal assessment within the past 3 years, and through that process, let's say HR development was identified as the most critical capacity need. So now the agency would like to apply for implementation funding to contract with a consultant to assist with the development of new policies and procedures. So within their application, the agency would explain that they need to purchase a new software system in order to carry out the implementation plan, and they clearly state why the software system is critical to the success of the plan. And so it's also important to note that there is a project budget that's required for implementation and infrastructure requests, and that can also be found on the homeforgoodla.org/grant seekers website. And so needs and costs that are outlined in the narrative should also match what is on the budget. So it's just important that, whatever is outlined in the narrative as a need is also clearly reflected on the budget template as well. Okay, and we're just going to run through the submission and review process. So applications will be accepted on a rolling basis. You may submit your application any day of the month, and review of applications will begin once a fully completed application has been received. So it is possible if there's pieces that are missing or incomplete that the LASA capacity building back out to an agency and request those missing documents to make sure an application is fully completed. And then at that point, it would be considered submitted. And application instructions can be found on each respective application, but they should all be submitted to rfp@unitedwayla.org. And as Allison mentioned at the start of the presentation, all applications will be reviewed by the Home for Good Funders Collaborative Evaluation Panel, and all awarded agencies will be contracting directly with United Way for the grant, the entire grant amount. And applicants can expect for the full review and awards process to take between 3 to 5 months from the date of fully completed submission. And so that range just kind of depends on the agency and the nature of the application.
For the contracting piece as well, we do reserve the right as United Way to work with you to see if it's better suited to directly contract with the vendor that you've selected as well. In some cases, some agencies have opted for that because they did not want to necessarily process another application, another contract on their side. And so we're happy to work with you to make sure it's the best fit for all of us in terms of that process. So the funding will go from United Way to either the selected vendor that has been approved, or will go to your agency to then contract out again through to a vendor. Just spotlight before I forget, the United Way is managing a pool of money through the Home for Good Funders Collaborative related to this effort. We also work very closely with other funders who align investment. So we've asked for leverage information, who else you've applied to for capacity building dollars, and all that is to make sure that we are coordinating as closely as possible with who might have an interest in complementing the investment of the collaborative and public investment. Some funders cannot pool through United Way, so this is a way that we can ensure that we're maximizing the opportunities we have, that we're meeting your needs as much as possible. But we do want to underscore the importance of you sharing that information up front. If you have applications that are already in process with funders for complementary capacity building needs, or if you plan to apply to someone this year. That's all very valuable information as we're helping coordinate on the back end with funders.
Okay. All right, so what we'll do now is go over the core capacity assessment tool. As we're expanding the capacity building efforts, we really look to offer resources to continue to support the work that you guys are focusing and prioritizing as it relates to organizational development. And with the core capacity assessment tool, we've partnered with the TCC group, and the overall goal for the core capacity assessment tool will be the overall goal for the core capacity assessment tool is for the capacity building efforts to increase the organizational effectiveness. Sorry, a little tight on there. And so the core capacity assessment tool contains 4 major components. That's your adaptive capacity, leadership capacity, and technical capacity. And so the TCC group works to lay out those 4 elements and really dig in through the survey to develop recommendations as well as highlight the strengths that your organization has in these key areas. And so the TCC group will also go through the life cycle and the stages of your organization and organizational culture. So we wanted to offer this resource to all providers through the technical assistance application, as well as if you are applying for funding through LASA and the RFSQ process, and also if you're already a current LASA funded provider. So through this particular assessment, you'll have an opportunity to receive a final report and recommendations, and then interpretation session with the TCC group. And so you would be able to utilize this tool to provide further information and inform your strategic planning and prioritize your efforts around administrative development and organizational development. The way we've structured the release of the core capacity assessment tool is that you a orientation session led by the TCC group, and then from the orientation session, you'll have access to the survey for approximately 30 days. So because of the volume in which we are providing access to the survey links, we have cohorts in which you'll be able to participate in. Our next cohort is scheduled for October, and so we can continue to give information. If you haven't already received information, if you're a LASA approved vendor, please reach out to the capacity building organization. If you're not a LASA approved vendor or have submitted a request for RFSQ, then once you have submitted your application through the capacity building application and you're going through the contracting process, then you'll also have an opportunity to attend the orientation, and then we'll have access to the core capacity assessment tool. So anything, Doc?
Yeah, so the assessment tool, it's a self-assessment that your agency will do. It will require anywhere between 3 to 5
members of your organization's leadership to work through the self-assessment. It takes about 45 minutes, and then you receive that report, as Candace said, and it gives you some real-time recommendations that your agency can take to address some capacity issues. So as part of this application process, you would be receiving the CCAT if you haven't gotten it through those other mechanisms that Candace mentioned. Okay, moving on. Okay.
And then also, as a part of this opportunity, we have a list of pre-approved vendors and consultants that we're working with and are offering, particularly to applicants that are assessment funding. If you haven't already thought through who or have a relationship that you've developed with a particular consultant, we have a list of approved vendors that will be able to provide the support that you need in order to assess your organizational development. So areas that the vendors are actually going to be taking a look at is, again, going back to the areas of focus from the application, and that would be your program administration, so things like strategic program planning, partnership and collaboration. Also leadership, so that would be your board development structure, and then another area would be your operational management, so those are things like policy and procedures and risk management. So we have a list, and you can access that list of vendors through the application. You can go to homeforgoodla.org/grant seekers for a list of vendors. Also to note, we are planning to re-release a request for qualifications to solicit additional professional service consultants so that we continue to have a robust pool of vendors and consultants available to you.
And if agencies have a specific vendor or consultant in mind that is not on this list that they are interested in working with, that is possible. It will just be part of the application process to demonstrate that you've gone through a competitive process to settle on that particular consultant. So just keep that in mind, and just to gather that documentation as they're going through that procurement process with your consultant, just to be able to demonstrate that you did go through a competitive process. And if it's not on this list, you will have to submit the name of that person for approval by United Way before officially contracting.
So that is to also say, to underscore that if you don't know at the time of request, and that has been more common in our assessment side of the house, where people are kind of unsure of which direction to go, so they're applying to get a start. You can apply without knowing who you're going to be working with. It is encouraged to explore this pre-approved list, though, because they are all qualified agencies who have an extreme amount of skill, who are familiar with this project, and who have availability to work with your agencies. So we do encourage you to look at this list and really to see if any of them are a fit for your specific projects, especially if you're on the assessment side, where I think many of these agencies offer a variety of services and supports and have done a number of assessments before for agencies in the homeless service sector already. That's the end of the actual presentation part. We're seeing questions come in, which is great, so keep them coming on the chat. Reminder, you're all on mute, so if you're trying to share your question by phone, it's not going to work, so you can just chat it in instead, and we'll start going down the list.
All right, so we'll take just a quick minute to start reading through some of those questions, compile our thoughts, and then share them back out. So we'll be right back in just one moment. Okay, so thanks for holding. We have a couple questions that came through. So the first question was asking about the core capacity assessment tool orientation. So just to clarify, we have an upcoming orientation session that will take place on October 10th. If you submit your application prior, it may be a little tough to get it reviewed in time for the October 10th orientation date. But what we will be doing is once you're awarded a grant through this opportunity, we will essentially at that point be making the orientation session available to you. So we apologize for any confusion. The orientation session invite will come at contracting. So if you happen to maybe submit an application or you're really close, you may make it in time for the October 10th session, but you will be invited to attend an orientation upon contract execution. Okay. So next question was asking, can the assessment of office space or restructuring office space to add additional staff be part of this process? The answer is yes. You can hire a consultant to do an assessment of your office space to see if maybe you can fit some extra cubicles in there so your staff aren't facing the risk of sitting on each other's laps. So that is definitely an eligible assessment cost.
And the next question we have is about the application due date. And if there is a recommended time when organizations should submit their application. And I know there may be some confusion because with the first round of applications, there was a note on the application about submitting it the first of the month, but this is kind of a revised process, so organizations can submit any day of the month. There is no recommended time. The first of the month won't make any difference versus the 15th or the end of the month. So yeah, truly any day.
Yep, submit when you are ready. Okay. Okay, so the next question is, can we apply to work with a consultant and for our infrastructure needs in a single application?
Yes.
Yes.
That is the second version. The infrastructure implementation RFP is both of those combined: technical assistance, consulting, vendor time, and one-time cost. So both of those are in the same application. The only separate application is assessment. So yes, you can definitely apply for both of those at the same time.
Okay, so the next question is asking if one large agency can apply for multiple projects. So we ask that you keep the project somewhat focused. Something that we did fail to mention during the main presentation is that once your agency completes a project, you are able to reapply. So you complete a project and you're like, oh, great, that was fun. Let's work on this other area of need that we have. So you absolutely can come back once you've completed the initial time frame of your initial request. So you are eligible to submit multiple requests. We just ask that you complete out the first project before you would come back for a second application.
And in terms of, we have had some circumstances where we've had aligned funders, or there is a decent amount of pooled money through the private side where we can have different types of consulting or different types of costs within one request, but they're all related. The full picture is provided, and then we're able to work through that. So we would encourage you to have conversations in advance so that you're not, unnecessarily filling out additional information. But all that to say, it doesn't have to be one type of consultant and one type of cost. It can be multiple types within that, but it's all related capacity needs and related to your assessment findings. So there was a question about, I'm going to read it so I can actually read it for myself as well. So you said there are two types of funding, private, public. On the public side, you have Measure H. What about the private side? So it is, the Hope for Good Funders Collaborative is a group of public and private funders who jointly invest in solutions to homelessness each year. That includes, funding from private foundations throughout Los Angeles County who have invested in this solution. And so we do have funds that are pooled through United Way with the generous support of the various philanthropic partners at that table who are supporting this initiative and the investments in your organizations. We also, as I mentioned, work with aligned funders. So we have funders who are not necessarily pooling money, but are interested in investing in this area, and in organizations like yours, who we can help connect through this application process to your needs. And so those are kind of the sources of funding, but it is private investment. And then, you know, United Way, we fundraise every dollar that we give out. So I will say the money that's going out into the community is from our corporate partners, from individual donors, from home walkers. So all of those, all dollars combined to support this initiative.
We'll hold. We have a couple more questions coming in that may take a little bit more thought on how we answer. Okay, thanks for your patience.
And so the next question is, if an applicant has submitted an application and has follow-up questions or would like to know the status of their application, is there a contact person they can reach? And so just to kind of clarify the two different roles between LASA and United Way. So LASA is assisting with all pre-submission questions and scoping, or if an application is submitted and it's incomplete, a little bit of follow-up work to, you know, make sure everything that's required is in there. But once a fully completed application is submitted, at that point, it is now under kind of United Way and the Funders Collaborative Evaluation Panel review process. And so once that application is submitted, you would want to reach out to United Way, and you can contact the capacity building team at United Way by emailing rfp@unitedwayla.org. So again, if there's any questions about status updates or kind of where an application is at in the review process, you are welcome to email any of those questions to rfp@unitedwayla.org.
So we had a request of providing some examples of projects. So as we mentioned earlier, this webinar will be publicly available. After we wrap up, we'll post it online. So just take a minute and you'll be able to catch up on what you missed.
Okay. There's a question in building, and we want to transform it into transitional housing. So this has been a common question. This opportunity for one-time infrastructure is not for capital. So though there may be, you know, an assessment of your space to reconfigure it for staffing, that is related to a space question. This RFP is not for capital improvement projects. So redesigning your space for programmatic uses is not part of this. Building a space for programmatic use is not part of this. There are other funding opportunities within the continuum and within the county that are supportive of capital improvement projects, and so we would encourage you to look there. We also have several private funders who do support capital projects, and we would ask that you look to them for that type of request.
Okay, we'll be right back again. We have a couple more questions coming through. Okay, so the next question that came in is asking, are all subcontracted partners providing direct services required to complete the CCAT regardless of whether they're applying for the capacity building grant? So with the core capacity assessment tool, there's 3 ways to play, right? So the first is that you apply for this capacity building grant. You will automatically get one at contracting. So that's one. The second is if you are applying to be a LASA approved bidder through the RFSQ request for statement of qualifications process. When you submit your RFSQ documents, you'll receive a CCAT link. And the third way is if you are currently a LASA contractor or a subcontracted agency. So one way, you apply for the technical assistance grant. Other way, you apply to be a LASA vendor through the RFSQ process. Or the third way is you already are a LASA subcontract or subrecipient or contracted partner of LASA. So 3 ways to play. All right, and the next question is just asking for clarification. Can you apply for this opportunity without having submitted an application to LASA to become a qualified provider for bidding? So yes, you are eligible to apply for a technical assistance grant through this initiative, even if you are not an approved LASA. Okay, we'll hold. We have a couple more questions coming through.
Okay, so we have a question that I'm going to paraphrase. And I believe the question is it recommended to take the CCAT prior to submitting a application for capacity building? So it's not required. So with the CCAT, it's an added resource. So if you are already working with a consultant and you have an existing organizational strategic plan, then go ahead and submit your application based on that strategic plan. The CCAT will actually be an added resource to kind of allow us to collect data and as to where organizations are across the county that are providing homeless services. So then that CCAT will either help to inform or realign your efforts based on the existing strategic plan and assessment that you have.
The only clarifying thing I would add would be that if you have not completed a formal assessment process, if you're internally created a strategic plan, that does not count as a formal assessment. So just be mindful of like what you're submitting for your documentation related to a formal plan, whether that's the CCAT, whether that's a strategic plan, whether that's something else that you've created, that it needs to be a formalized process, not a staff-driven internal process.
Good clarification. Okay, we'll be posting our answers to the questions online. Yes, we will, and they will be under the frequently asked questions tab on the Home for Good LA/grant seekers page. Okay. Okay.
Waiting for more questions.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes, so if you have one last burning question, feel free to get that out now. We'll hold for a couple more minutes just to see if anything, any last minute questions come through. All right, so your time is valuable, so we don't want to keep anyone on the phone longer than we have to. It doesn't look like we have any other questions coming through, but if you think of something later today, you wake up in the middle of the night with a burning question, feel free to email those questions to capacitybuilding@lasa.org. We will add that we get to the frequently asked questions page, and we'll also post them online. Just to reiterate, this webinar was recorded, and we will make available and send the recording out as quickly as possible after we wrap up today. Okay, thanks so much. We appreciate your time and your interest in the opportunity, and we look forward to seeing your submitted applications. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.